This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Logan Simon, K-State Extension Agronomist, and Stacie Minson, K-State Watershed Specialist, and Jeremy Kootz, producer in Ellsworth County, start the show as they explain the value they see for cover crops. They talk about it from a soil health, water quality, and farmer perspective to understand why they have chosen cover crops. They have this conversation in the first two segments of the show. Ending the show is this week's lawn and garden segment from K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd as he discusses fall armyworms, mimosa webworms, cicada killers, and grubs. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show discussing the value of cover crops with K-State Extension Agronomist Logan Simon, K-State Watershed Specialist Stacie Minson, and a producer in Ellsworth County, Jeremy Kootz. Logan, Stacie, Jeremy, I appreciate you all taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Logan, you've been working on some cover crop research for this study, and why did you take the time to do it?
Yeah, so the entire conversation that we're going to have today is all tied into efforts around water quality and conservation in the Canopolis Reservoir, Smoky Hill River, Big Creek watershed. And so the RAPS program and watershed protection program in that area. One of the tools that we've been looking at in this watershed has been cover crops. But something unique about the watershed is being located in that central to west central Kansas area. Cover crops are sometimes questioned because cover crops use water and we don't always have a lot of water. Sometimes we do, like this year, but sometimes we don't have a lot of water. And so when we think about their utility, the value they bring a lot of times is around grazing. And so a lot of the work we've been doing in this watershed has been around grazing. And the study here specifically kind of built upon some past work that we've done in other parts of the watershed.
So what has been some of that past work and what did you build upon?
Yeah, so one of our previous studies that we had done on farm was in other parts of the watershed, Ellis, Rush, and Ellsworth counties. And in those cases, all on farm, we were just simply looking at that question of grazed versus ungrazed cover crops and impacts on soil properties and potential indicators of water quality outcomes. And in that study, what we found was really no significant differences when we are grazing versus where we're not grazing. And in this case, we were really just looking at grazing alone, kind of a take half, leave half scenario where we were leaving a lot of residue. And so in that way, the results that we saw really aren't that surprising when you see out there after we take cattle off and you're like, wow, there's a lot of material still out here. And so that really is what drew us to investigate kind of a broader range of grazing pressures and basically taking more of that cover crop off in pounds of beef, because we firmly believe that we probably could graze harder than we had before and still meet those soil health and water quality goals. And that really is what drove then this current study that we just completed in Russell County.
When you had the cattle on the soil for longer, did you have any compaction issues or issues with the cattle being there for longer?
Exactly. And so that's the concern around putting cattle out there on these cover crops is, are we basically defeating the purpose of having the cover crop out there in terms of our soil health and water quality goals? Of course, if we have any compaction out there, we could reduce water infiltration and in that way have more runoff that could contain who knows what in terms of nutrients and manure and so forth. And in this study, we really didn't see a significant impact of higher intensities of grazing compared to that take half, leave half. Our high intensity was what we were calling 90% removal or a graze out scenario. Basically, what we were doing is working with a rancher in Russell County. He was grazing to whatever intensity we were still seeing good cattle performance on. We can force cattle to graze longer, but you're gonna sacrifice performance. So we grazed pretty heavy, but then that kind of really the cattle performance goals did drive a lot of that. And so, yeah, in this study, we really didn't pick up any differences between that take half, leave half versus graze out scenario, kind of 50% removal versus 90% removal as it compares to the ungrazed check. We didn't really see any negative impacts in terms of both density, penetration resistance, or what we measured in time to runoff. No significant differences compared to that ungrazed check.
Does it matter what type of cover crop is being grazed?
So in this case, we were grazing. We had 2 cycles of grazing on this field, and by which I mean over the course of years. So in 2022, we planted a winter cover crop into wheat stubble, and then implemented our treatments with 4 replications randomized across about a 50-acre field. And then following that cover crop, after it was grazed and terminated, we went and rotated to grain sorghum. We followed that sorghum crop with another spring cover crop and implemented the treatments on the same pieces of ground, so that those that were grazed take half, leave half in year 1, graze out in year 1, were grazed again at the same intensity in year 2, and then we followed that with another crop of grain sorghum. And in this study, we measured after the first round of grazing and after the second round of grazing, and in both cases, we did not see any significant impacts. I would say more importantly than the type of cover crop that we're grazing, it's kind of related to what happens during that time period. When you think about when we're grazing in these studies, we're grazing in that early spring time frame. And especially in these years, we had some pretty dry springs. And so when we are grazing on dry ground, we're not terribly compactable, right? And so if we were grazing in a wetter scenario, say we had those wet springs, I think that we would expect that we could see more. One of the caveats that we really encourage producers to do when we're thinking about grazing cover crops in this region is it's so helpful to have a piece of rangeland next to that crop land that you're grazing the cover crop on to move cattle off that field immediately before or right after a rain, just to minimize the amount of potential compaction. And really, truly, depending on the amount of rain that we had, we're usually getting cattle back out on that cover crop within 24 to 48 hours. So, but it is helpful to have kind of that area to take cattle off just to prevent what could lead to more significant compaction. But in this study, with the dry springs that we were having that time of year or in those years, we did not see any impact.
And Stacie, obviously your focus on water quality. What did you see from this research in your area?
I think the biggest thing is just making people aware. This study was done in Russell County, so we're obviously a few miles from the reservoir, but we have 2,400 square miles that drain into Canopolis Reservoir, starting out in Gove County, Trego, Ellis, Russell, Ellsworth, and then we've got portions of the ones north and south of that main corridor. So, it's a big watershed. So it takes a lot of farmers and ranchers like Jeremy and his dad, Charlie, and then the producer there in Russell County to work with us. We've got guys in Ellis County, but looking at water quality, it's the ones that are doing it so that Jeremy's the pioneer, I guess, one of the pioneers, so that he can show that, yeah, this works. Ultimately, when we look at that, we're letting the cattle do what they're supposed to do, and we're saving a couple things. Jeremy doesn't have to go find more rangeland when we're not making any more of that. What's out there and what he's got access to is is there. Maybe if he would have won the big lottery the other night, he could have bought a whole bunch of acres of ground. But we're letting the cattle graze. We're keeping them away from the creeks and rivers that they're using as a water source. So these guys, we will help provide alternative water on cropland, and that's one of the stumbling blocks for many because they don't have a water source on a cropland field. So as Logan mentioned, if we've got rangeland and we've got cropland together, maybe there's not a great source on part of that rangeland. So we'll put that water source maybe on the fence line or make it so that you can open a gate. It's got panels and gates so that they can do it. You know, some will haul water. We understand that that's completely an option too. But when you look at it in the spring, specifically, not that they're not just as busy in the fall, but in the spring, we've got lots of things, lots of wheels in motion. So if we can allow the cattle to do what they're supposed to do, so Jeremy can use his time somewhere else, then we're protecting that water quality. We are keeping the cattle there. They're utilizing the cover crops. They're building soil health with the cover crops that we've got out there.
That was K-State watershed specialist Stacie Minson, and she was joined by K-State extension agronomist Logan Simon. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll once again be joined by Stacie and Logan, as well as Kansas producer Jeremy Kootz as they continue their conversation. If you're reaching your destination and aren't going to be able to hear the rest of today's show, you can always find it on agtoday.net or by searching for Agriculture Today on your favorite podcast platform. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show and conversation about cover crops and soil and water quality with K-State watershed specialist Stacie Minson, K-State extension agronomist Logan Simon, and a producer in Ellsworth County, Jeremy Kootz. Stacie, as we're talking about water quality, is there an important reservoir that you're really keeping in mind as you did this work?
We look big picture on the reservoir. Canopolis is a federal drinking water supply. So we have to do everything we can do to protect the nitrate, the E. coli bacteria, the sediment. You know, that's the biggest thing. We know we had some major rains in Ellsworth County the last couple days. And so if all of that sediment and nutrients are coming off of those crop fields and going into Canopolis, then, you know, we're not going to build another Canopolis for people to use as a water supply. So it takes everybody, whether they're a livestock producer or a crop producer. Either way, we can do it. And so maybe Jeremy has the cover crops, but he doesn't have the cattle. So can we get him to work with the neighbor who has some cattle so that we can utilize it? And as Logan mentioned, it's the bottom dollar. If we can give Jeremy the ability to put cover crops out there, and maybe we're going to use some of that future crops yield, but we're offsetting it with the livestock operation. It's a win-win for the farmer and the rancher and for our water quality protection.
So Stacie, just reminding, we didn't see a difference when cover crops were grazed more or less with runoff or water quality?
Well, I don't know that we can actually say that directly. We didn't have the research out there, but I would tell you because we had cover, we had some type of vegetation. Obviously, the more days out of a year we can have a living root, the soil itself is doing what it's supposed to. We're using bacteria. We're using everything in that soil structure to build upon, to protect it. If we have cover, I mean, anybody can go look in their yard today. If it's raining and you've mowed your grass really short, you're going to see water running off of your yard or your garden or your landscape, a parking lot type of thing. If we have some type of cover, whether it is living root or even the crop residue, when that water drop hits, it has to stay there a little bit. Another way I explain it with kids, if you have I talk to a lot of fourth graders, especially with Kids Ag Day, and we do a water event at Canopolis. If you have a boy or a girl that have a lot of hair, and then you have one that has a buzz cut or their hair's cut really short, when that water hits the kid that's got a lot of hair, that water's going to sit there. So that would be our no-till or our minimum till or no-till field. If we have somebody that's got that buzz cut or maybe doesn't have any hair, they are definitely our no-till. When that rain is hitting their head, it's running. So there's nothing to grab it. So as long as we have something out there, a plant material that we can have that water drop hang on to, we have a lot more likelihood that it's going to infiltrate and stay on that field versus running down into the reservoir and taking pollutants and nutrients with it.
Jeremy, what was it like to implement cover crops into your operation with your father?
It went really well. Dad was very receptive to the idea and open-minded to try some things. And I think early on we saw cover crops complement both cropping system and cattle enterprise in our case. And it let us vertically integrate, I guess, the two and help our bottom line. But we've seen, so many positive things come from it, not to mention the grazing. But then Stacie and Raps has given us the opportunity to do it with infrastructure and those first few years with KRPI, allowing us to just put the cover crop out there and just continue to do it. And every year is a little bit different, but we've definitely seen positive impact on our farm.
What are those things you take into consideration when you decide, let's go plant a cover crop or versus maybe not this year?
I think first off, it's our goal, I guess, as far as what's the next crop and where does it fit in between the previous crop. And then, also grazing goals too. Timeline, whether we want to do a warm season or a cool season. Are we looking for winter feed, in season, like July, August feed? Regardless, we're extending our grazing season. It's just what part of that season, I guess, are we targeting?
If other farmers, producers are thinking about cover crops, what's your recommendation for things they should think through?
I guess, first off, if they are going to plant it, what's their goal? What do they want to see from it, I guess? And the next thing would be the next crop as far as the residue management. So then how hard to graze it, or if they want to graze it, and if they don't have the livestock, maybe line some up with someone because they can sure have it custom grazed and help that bottom line.
Are there potentially any other options as well?
The other option is we could do swathing and baling. For the watershed protection side of it, swathing and baling is good for us as well. And as Jeremy mentioned, if you don't have the cattle enterprise, there's nothing to say that you can't swath and bale. There are neighbors that need the bales, they need the feed. So you could sell that and add that to your operation. The other thing Jeremy mentioned, KRPI, which is Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative. That is money that is coming into targeted watersheds across the state of Kansas, and Canopolis is one of them. So there is actually still money available. So if you live in Russell County and Ellsworth County, there are funds available to do cover crops. Some structural practices, we still have to have a need for it. And so Jeremy was one of the very first ones in Ellsworth County that did the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative. And because he participated in that, he's continued on. I think the one thing for farmers and ranchers, and it is pretty impressive when those cattle are standing there waiting for that gate to be opened. You know, it's like when you're getting ready to go to the K-State football game right before kickoff. It is truly like a candy store for those cattle. And we were fortunate enough last fall to be out there when Jeremy and his dad opened the gate. And it is phenomenal to watch the cattle go to that, to do what they're supposed to do while we're building soil health and protecting water quality. If we can all start looking at that, what Jeremy does ultimately he wants to increase his profits. What Logan does, Logan wants to educate and do the same thing, help farmers and ranchers do that. And for me, I want to be able to provide the resources, provide some of the education so that we can protect that reservoir long term for the generations to come and for Jeremy's little 2-year-old that hopefully will take over the farm as well.
If people want to find more information about KRPI, RAPS, or this study, what's your recommendation?
I think the best thing is, call me, email me, 785-769-3297. They can also go to the local Ellsworth County Conservation District if they're local. Contact your local county conservation district. Go to your K-State Research and Extension county offices. Reach out to Logan. Reach out to Jeremy. You can find us. We're not very hard to find. And if you call your local offices, they can get you to us. Or if you don't know your local offices, call us. We'll get you there.
Stacie, Logan, Jeremy, I appreciate you all taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby.
That was K-State Watershed Specialist Stacie Minson, and she was joined by K-State Extension Agronomist Logan Simon and a producer in Ellsworth County, Jeremy Kootz, as they discussed the value of cover crops. If you'd like to reach out to Stacie, one way you can do so, as she mentioned in today's show, is by reaching out via phone. Her number is 785-769-3297. Once again, that phone number is 785-769-3297. You can also find it in today's show notes on acttoday.net. You are also able to reach out to Stacie via email, and her email is sedgett@ksu.edu. Once again, that is sedgett@ksu.edu. If you have questions for Logan, you can also email him at lsimon@ksu.edu. lsimon@ksu.edu. Also in today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will put a link where you can learn more about K-State Watershed Specialist or find more information about the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative. Once again, all this information, as always, can be found on agtoday.net, or you can also find it with our podcasts by searching for Agriculture Today on your favorite podcast streaming platform. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll have this week's horticulture segment.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. While damage from mimosa webworms is visible from the second generation's feeding, it's too late to apply insecticides. However, K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd says you can manage future infestations by using insecticides on young caterpillars next year. This week he also has information on cicada killers, grubs, and fall armyworm. Raymond, we've been hearing a lot about fall armyworm, and I think we're maybe more towards the end of that now.
Yeah, I think so, Jeff. We've had a number of inquiries, but now as the temperatures get cooler, the days get shorter, you should expect less damage. Now remember, the fall armyworm does not overwinter in Kansas. It's too cold, so they'll just die out and then they're done. They overwinter in Texas and Florida, and how we get them is when the moths emerge. They get caught in the wind currents or the jet stream, and then they move north. I think the furthest is Minnesota. They drop down into Kansas, and then the females will start laying eggs on any structures, porches, or any chairs or whatever, and that's how we get the fall armyworm. So eventually, if you watch your lawn on a regular basis, there should be a decline in the caterpillars. If you do see some damage still, there is some spray options, but if you can wait it out, they will be gone.
Same thing with mimosa webworm, or is that still active?
Mimosa webworm is still active. If you've driven around in Manhattan and other areas, you'll see the honey locust trees all webbed up, brown. That's the mimosa webworm dam. It's too late to do anything. The mimosa webworm is a very challenging insect because there's a very small, narrow window of opportunity to kill the caterpillars before they web the leaves together. So you miss the opportunity. What you probably need to do is go out there early on in the season, look for the caterpillars on plants, take a white sheet of paper and a clipboard, shake some branches. If you see them, that would be the time to spray. Because once the leaves are folded over, that protects them from insecticide applications and also subsequent attack from natural enemies or beneficial insects.
You've got a publication out on cicada killers, and that is something that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, cicada killer adults, the males are what's out there. They're territorial. The females, they will grab a dog-day cicada, bring it into the nest, and that's where she lays the eggs, and that's the food source for the larva. So when you see these large, and we've had inquiries, they're not the European hornet, they're not the murder hornet, they are cicada killers. They can't sting you because the males do not have the egg-laying device, or what we call ovipositor. But if you want more information, you can download the new extension publication on cicada killers.
That's something that we hear, but also, like you mentioned, something that we see, and that's kind of why we take note of it.
Well, when you see these large 4-inch wasps flying around your face, it's very intimidating, and that's why people get concerned. And then right away they think it's the murder hornet, or it's the Washington, or the yellow-legged hornet down in Georgia and the southeast. But it's not. They're not here yet. But the main one they're talking about is the cicada killer.
The other thing, grubs, we will probably see those in the lawn.
Yeah, we're going into September. If you have damage from the grubs, they're most likely going to be third instars. It's too late to apply the typical proactive preventative materials. If your turf grass is suffering from damage, you can apply a product called Dilox. The active is trichlorophon. It's the only material that will provide a rescue treatment, but it only lasts about 3 days. So you may have to make more than one application. But what you need to do is go to the turf grass, cut a 1 foot by 1 foot C-section, peel it back, and see what your level of grub activity is. And we've had some instances where there have been substantial numbers or densities of grubs causing damage. And so the only option would be to apply the Dilox that would kill these later instar grubs before they go into the overwintering stage.
As you mentioned, a lot of publications available, and if they have other questions, they can always check in with their extension agents.
I would first go through your county or regionalized extension agents, and then if they don't know, they'll contact me or some other entomologist. So take advantage of these sources and also the extension publications we have online. I developed one on lace bugs, which is a pest. You can still see the damage on oaks and other plants, and they're free. So just go ahead and utilize those resources. Educate yourself about the biology, the ecology, and life cycle to understand the best way to deal with them management-wise, whether being using insecticides or miticides or using no pesticides at all.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd. Again, for more information, look for K-State publications or contact your local extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.